Hello, everybody, and welcome to CX Today. I'm your host, Floyd, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Sean Zhang from Sanus. So glad to have you on the call today, Sean. Excited to talk about all things AI accents. But before we get into the detail, I think it's always great in these videos if you could just introduce yourself to our audience and introduce Sanus as a company.
Yeah, sounds great. And super happy to be here. So, just to introduce myself. So, my name is Sean Zhang. I'm the technical co founder and CTO of Sonus. So, Sonus, we're about 5 years old as a company. So, we were actually incorporated in April 1st, 2020. So, So, almost, a little bit over 5 years now at this time. So, Sonus, we are primarily known for our real time accent translation solution. So in real time, we will actually modulate the accent and pronunciations from one accent distribution to another accent distribution, depending on the listener. And we actually got our start here at Sonus based off our own personal experiences. And we have a little bit of an origin story. And so we actually created Sonus back in college at Stanford University. And we had a classmate and a friend who actually had to go back home in Nicaragua. And so he was telling us how, hey, I'm in Nicaragua. I got a local job here. And the job that I got was as a call center agent. And we're like, oh, how, super cool. How's your job? How's life? How's your job treating you? And he's like, man, I hate my job because essentially he would get a lot of complaints from these customers and these listeners. And it was primarily just on his accent, not on his job skills, the way he was able to, solve the customer complaint or query or to debug any sort of problem on the customer's end. But in fact, it was this accent. And this is where it was extremely frustrating for us as his friends, because we know he was a super smart and capable guy, and yet something that is really out of his control, right? And not something that he wants to change either. But it's a fact that accent can be a barrier in terms of communication because there's something that we're just not familiar to hearing. And this is where he was getting very low job performance, low scores, lower pay. And eventually it was at a point where he was about to almost get fired at his job, right? And that's sort of like where, I think this is how college students get introduced to the, call center, contact center industry. And I think that's sort of like where we were super pumped to like, hey, can we think about building a solution to help reduce and lower this barrier in communication? And, I also come from a bit of an AI background, studying computer science and at Stanford. And we were super pumped to be like, hey, what if we could build something that can translate the accent in real time? And it was just that simple idea that got us really pumped, allowed us to build a proof of concept, an MVP, and the snowball just kept on rolling and rolling, and we're sort of here where we are right now at Sonus. And I would say the Sonus vision and mission has evolved over time as well, where we also don't want to just be the accent company, but also the company that improves speech understanding. And also not even just the contact center industry, but an overall speech platform. So the way we think about it is that there are a lot of barriers in communication. So accent is one that we got our start, but there's a lot of things such as noise, right? Mm-hmm. Or the acoustic environments, or even languages. There's all these different factors in speech that can cause frictions in communication. And we have a lot of things in our roadmap and up our sleeve to continue to empower our communication and everybody's speech to connect people, across the world.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that introduction. And I think it's really good to hear from your perspective how Sanus came about because, accent translation, it's a bit of an edgy topic, a lot of people have different opinions about it. But, a lot of the opinion that's kind of can come from people on the outside is, is it ethical to be changing people's, accents? Can it further embed, issues that are already prevalent? But it's quite interesting to hear from your perspective how it can actually aid agents in their job performance and then equally in their everyday life. So it'd be great to talk about that a little bit more because obviously a lot of the time it's pitched as like, it's going to improve your CX because, people will be able to understand the agent. But it's actually a lot more complex than that, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And thank you for bringing that up as well, because this is something that we consider extremely seriously, sort of like this ethics, right?
Mhm.
I would say the first thing for us is just that we I mean, one is like I think we really want to humanize the CX industry. I think a lot of times, like, you're on the phone, you don't sort of see the other person on the line, and sometimes you forget who you're speaking to, and it's another human being.
Mhm.
And the way we see about accents is that one, we celebrate accents, right? Everyone has a unique part of their own voice, and accent is a very core piece of everybody's identity. And it is because of that fact that for us, we find it to be incredibly disheartening to feel that my accent might prohibit me from getting a job that I want,
Mhm.
right? And that was certainly the case for a very close friend of ours. That's also something that we relate to just in our own personal lives. So one is, Sonos was co-founded by people that came from immigrants, right? So I think I actually grew up here in America, but my family were first generation immigrants from China. And my mother and father would tell me, you're so lucky to be growing up here in America where you're able to have a better understanding and proficiency in English, also in my accent and dialect, because it's allowed me to be able to communicate more effectively in my job and my role for other people around me. But when we think about international communication, where maybe you're not as familiar hearing this particular accent, you feel less confident, right? I would certainly feel less confident when I speak Chinese back to my family back home in China. Um, so that's the first thing there. And then I think the second thing here is just that we want to make sure that this is something that improves both parties in the conversation, right? So one, obviously the listener, they're able to understand a little bit smoother, a little bit cleaner, just because these are pronunciations that they're a little bit more familiar hearing. And then two is on the contact center agent, they're having a lot smoother experience because one, they don't have to often repeat themselves like, hey, can you say that again? Hey, I don't understand you. You get to avoid those questions a lot more, and you get to feel more confident. Like, okay, we're progressing a lot more in this debugging the customer's issue, and also this is where I think because you're able to have a lot more of a clearer connection with each other, it just celebrates that conversation a lot more and encourage just like a more open discussion with everybody. So that's sort of what we want, and we just don't want anyone to feel like, hey, my accent, key part of my identity, nothing that I don't want to change it, nor can I really able to change it. I don't want that to prohibit me from any job opportunities. And hopefully here at Sonus, we're able to enable more opportunities for everybody across the world.
Yeah, definitely, and I think the industry does understand that. Obviously, the ethical debate will always be growing as AI rolls out. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at BPOs, they're rolling out this kind of technology pretty quickly. So I feel like people in the industry understand the benefits that this technology will bring. So
Yeah.
I think just to focus on that in a little bit more detail, how do you think enterprises looking to implement accent translation should go about it? Because obviously it's quite a
Yeah.
mammoth task to implement that into everyday. What are the key considerations, and then also finally, you know, what advice would you have for the way that they communicate this technology to the agents that will be using it?
Yeah, great questions. So one is, let me just first talk about integration, right?
Hmm.
Because I know that definitely is a big friction, and I know how enterprises, there's a lot of steps that come in to actually integrate a new product into your own platform. So let me just plug Sonus here a little bit. So here at Sonus, we like to have a very seamless integration. So again, as frictionless as possible. So the beauty of Sonus is that we had built our algorithm as a virtual microphone. So it's
Hmm.
something as easy as swapping your microphone, swapping your headset. That's how easy it is to have the Sonus plugin and actually have Sonus in the middle to empower those conversations. And so something like that, we can show that it's very easy for your IT to actually implement this, adopt this into integrating it whatever your stack might look like at this time. Now, just how my advice looking for our enterprise and for these customers is I'm going to piggyback off of what I just said in the last question, where you
Hmm.
want to look at this in both ways. I would look in terms of how does accent translation affect CSAT as well as ESAT, right? So one is on the customers, right? You want to look at these business KPIs. Hey, how have customer satisfaction scores been going up? what has been the response on our own customer base, and how does this translate in terms of average handling times? Average handling times will go down because you have less of those questions of like, hey, can you say that again? I don't understand you, etc. And because you have lower average handling time, you will also see a natural increase in customer satisfaction because you're able to understand or you're able to solve those queries a lot faster. The other thing then, of course, is the ESAT. You have to ask your agents, hey, my agents, my employees, how are you guys liking the accent translation service? Is this something that you guys are enjoying? Can you tell the difference in your actual day-to-day job and operations now? And so this is something that we here at Sonos that we take very seriously. And again, we want to look at both sides of the conversation. So we ask our customers and our businesses, look at the CSAT, and also let's do the agent surveys and the testimonials with the agents themselves. And oftentimes, what we'll see is that the agents will say, they'll come in with a little bit of skepticism themselves, right? So they're like, oh, I'm not really sure. Is this really going to, is this really going to improve? Am I really going to feel that difference? But then once we implement it and we just say, let the results speak for themselves, let the experience speak for you, they're able to implement Sonos and then they'll see, wow, I can just tell because I'm, again, having 8 hours of conversations every day, but I'm getting less of those frustrations from the customer side. I can feel like I'm being heard a lot more. And I think you'll feel that different experience and response from the customer, and the agent themselves will be like, wow, I feel like I can do a lot more of my job here. Number one, I feel a lot better quality of life because I'm getting less abused on these calls. I'm getting less insults. I'm getting less any of these things that are coming at me that affect my mood in the day. So that's what I would recommend. Please look at ESAT as well as CSAT.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that might help agents as well, because I know a lot of money and a lot of time goes into kind of like training people to have softer accents in call centers like globally. You know, that can be quite a self-conscious thing, when you're on your phone, on the phones, maybe you're new to the job altogether, it's just that's an extra thing that you've got to try and think about and worry about. And, I couldn't change my accent. I've got like a thick northern accent, if I tried to speak southern, it just wouldn't work. So
Great accent,
for
yeah.
the agents themselves, they can just focus on, speaking how they need to speak. They can communicate in the way,
Yes,
and then kind of just trust on the technology to pass it through on the other
exactly.
end. So I guess that's where accuracy comes in. For enterprises that are, implementing this technology. How important is accuracy, do you think, in their decision making, or is the confidence like pretty high from the get go?
Yeah, I mean, accuracy is 100%, right? So, I mean, one is here at Sonos, we are deployed in some very sensitive sectors, right? So, we like to think about health and wealth. When you think about healthcare, these are things where you really do not want to mess up a prescription, right? You really do not want to mess up giving any sort of medical advice to any customers. And of course, in finance, you don't want to say you don't want to say billion when you mean million, right?
Yeah.
So accuracy here is incredibly important. So this is sort of like why here at Sonos we actually have again built the accent translation in a different way. So we don't want to build accent translation such that it's like speech to text, and then again back to the speech synthesis because speech to text again has been getting more and more better. But then you'll still see those 5% edge cases where you might get this word wrong or this phoneme wrong, like million, billion, and the meaning substantially changes. So this is here. One is we have built our technology that we are very sensitive to accuracy so that we don't misconstrue exactly what you're saying. So the way you say it is exactly the way it will be portrayed. We want to be making sure that we're 100% confident on that. And then two, of course, is, okay, making sure that you feel confident in how you speak, right? That's the premise of Sonos's action translation technology. So, and then again, we let the results speak for themselves. And, Sonos, we do have major deployments in these health and wealth sectors. And then again, the response has been really overwhelmingly positive. So we're very
Yeah.
confident on that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So obviously you've spoken about a couple of different like verticals, if you like, where this technology has been implemented. Would you say there's a sector that's a bit more susceptible to implementing AI, or is there sectors that are a little bit more like cautious, or do you kind of see it, progressing,
Yeah.
equally?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely, I would still say like health and wealth sectors. So the main thing how we see is that oftentimes when we go into these conversations with customers, you'll have to go through a lot of committees for
Hmm.
approvals. And again, especially with AI, there's a lot of these concerns about ethics. And I think this is also where Sonus, we've had a big edge in getting these approvals and getting it seamlessly integrated into everybody's stack, is because we're not doing a generative AI where you're generating words from nothing, right? So, here at Sonus, again, the way that your agents are saying it, we're not going to change the way they say. We're not changing the grammar or the words that they're saying. We're just changing the pronunciations of the accent, and then making sure that everybody feels more confident about how they're talking and and the words that they're saying. And then I think if you think about AI, a lot of it has been the rise of autonomous AI agents, where you sort of like have chatbots taking control. And I think there it becomes a little bit more scary in that, there might be some words or some dialogues that maybe was not modeled in that chatbot. And I think that's where you need to have these generative AI committees to put the proper guardrails in place. And so definitely we encounter this all the time. And this is where here at Sonus we have a lot of our own benchmarks and evaluations and alignment teams that do a lot of work here. So yeah, I would say health and wealth continues to be most sensitive. But again, this is why Sonus has been able to get in, is because we want to make sure be more confident with AI rather than more uncertain.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the point on guardrails is a good point. We've covered quite a lot of stories on CXA that have been quite comical. Like, I think a chatbot gave someone a flight for like $10.
Sure.
And I saw in the UK on Virgin Money, it's like a banking thing. They hadn't guardrailed the word Virgin, so when someone asked to close their Virgin Money account, the chatbot stopped speaking to them because they thought they was being abusive.
Wow.
So yeah,
Wow.
and also when they called Virgin Money, that's a guardrail you would have thought would be in place. So it's great that Sanas, you can take that different approach to that, and that isn't that much of a concern. So
Right.
just to move the topic on a little bit further, what would you say to those companies that are on the fence about AI technology, both with Sanas and more widely? Because there's a lot of companies that are dabbling within AI, but when it comes to like full scale implementation, across their seats in a contact center, that's lagging behind a little bit in comparison to those that are dabbling. So maybe the question should be,
Right.
why do you think that is? And then also what the advice from a Sanas perspective is to kind of like push people over the line.
Yeah, great question. So I think again with AI, it is I think with AI, it can be a bit of that black box, and there can be some of that uncertainty. It's like, oh, because the way you think about it is, here's the beauty of speech, is that it's almost it's a huge field, right? You never know exactly where the conversation might go in those 0.1% edge cases. And I think that's obviously where the fear comes in. Is like, obviously we don't want to give away that $10 flight. We also don't want to make sure that the user experience gets misconstrued, and then somehow the conversation gets derailed. So totally understand about these concerns. And I also, and even though here at Sonos we focus on the human to human interaction and less so on the human to machine interaction, I actually am a big proponent that, again, technology will get better, and I think we'll have more of these guardrails in place with more explainability and more controllability. But I think one thing is, the best way to do this is to have the proper testing. I think everybody needs to be sure, like, hey, when we think about these customer interactions, each interaction can be a make it or break it moment. And so these are things that need to be extremely thoroughly tested. They need to be benchmarked. There needs to be proper alignment. There needs to be, across these evaluations, across all these different demographics, in a very comprehensive setting, because when it goes in production out in the wild, it will go through the ringer. It will go through all these different comprehensive test cases that you didn't even think about in the very beginning. So one is, I will think that we as a society need to make sure that we're being careful on these integrations. I'm not saying that we don't do it, right? I think this, again, as we progress, we want to be able to adopt these technologies so that we can perform more efficiently. But it's also very key important that you're not losing any of those business KPIs that represent your brand and your company's image. And I think here at Accent and here at Sonus, one, we really emphasize the human component of it. We believe that human-to-human interactions are still going to be a very important part of, a person's brand and customer's experience. And I think, again, here at Sonus, we just want to make sure that we have the proper alignment teams and evaluation benchmarks, and that we cover all of these different settings, right? When people are speaking very fast or in low volume, speaking with very high emotions, like, these are coverages that we just want to make sure that we can show you. And again, let's do this in a very controlled setting and then scale up over time.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Thanks for covering that off. And obviously, we've spoken about accent translation quite a lot in this call. But obviously, you guys do a lot with like noise reduction and stuff like that. So that's quite important to consider in call centers as well and contact centers because, you know, one of the biggest problems I have if I'm ever on the phone and I've got a problem, it isn't people's accents necessarily, but it
Right.
tends to be the background noise makes it so hard for me to hear. So it'd be great to cover off kind of like the innovations that you've got around, you know, noise reduction and that as well.
So one thing first is that I'll also tell you that Sonus, our IP, our special sauce is actually not the accent. It's
Hmm.
actually speech understanding where we here at Sonus, we understand speech in the most deepest level possible, in the lowest level possible. Where we look at speech, we look at it like a big soup, right? So all of these elements are in speech, just as your accent, but also it will be, background noise, background voices, foreground voice, my tone, my emotion, my rhythm, my prosody, my pitch, all of these things, right? And so what we have built is our own foundational model to be able to disentangle all these elements of speech to be like, hey, these are the things that we want to keep. These are the things that we want to remove. These are the things that we want to modulate or change up, right? And so we took this foundational model that built our action translation and we were like, okay, why don't we build it for just noise cancellation so that we are, again, isolating everything that is background voice, background noise, and foreground voice. So
Hmm.
one, just to talk about Sonos's noise cancellation here, one big thing is that we are scientifically breaking down the background voices and the foreground voices. So one, you might see traditional noise cancellation algorithms that maybe work on what they call stationary noises like white noise, static, etc. So this is where our algorithm has been able to detect the difference between the distances from the microphone. So,
Hmm.
one, if I have a headset, you'll know that I'm a few inches away from the microphone versus my friendly coworker who's sitting shoulder to shoulder with me, he might be speaking from 2 feet away, right? Now we're both humans, we're both speaking voices, and it's both actual speech, but one of us is a foreground speaker, one of them is a background speaker. So one is we've built the Sonos noise cancellation using AI for the AI to figure out what is the distance, what is the difference between that, because this is where acoustically there's a bit of that in the physics and even beyond human explanation sometimes you can tell a little bit of a difference in like the reverb or the echo of the voice. And then one final thing that I just want to point out about Sonos's noise cancellation is that here at Sonos, we actually added an innovative feature where we actually not only remove the background noise and background voices, we are also touching up on the foreground speech as well. So we're actually doing some speech enhancement. We're trying to improve the fidelity of the foreground speech. How do we make that foreground speech sound more richer, more full, and because of that, more clear? And I think that's also been a big feature that we've been that resonates really well with our contact center customers. Because especially in a contact center on a telephony channel, you might be working 8 kilohertz. And you might can tell like, hey, the difference between the telephone audio versus the audio I hear in Zoom or even in this call or in the movie theaters, you have a lot higher sampling rates and a lot higher frequencies for a lot more of a full, rich sound. And so in our noise cancellation, we built this fidelity feature. So, hey, even in the telephony and call center channel, how do we make that audio sound more rich?
Hmm.
And again, that richness we believe represents that brand because I think, your voice, in a literal sense, does represent your brand. And these are the things that I think noise cancellation, which has been almost commoditized and has
Hmm.
been built into all these different video conferencing platforms, we want to continue to move the boundaries. How do we push the envelope forward and be like, hey, not just remove the background noises, but actually improve and enhance the foreground speech as well?
Yeah, definitely. Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate in development there. So yeah, really excited to see all that. And obviously, everyone that's watching today will be able to keep up to date with everything that's happening from Sanus over the next year or so. So yeah, just like to thank you for your time today, Sean. This is a topic I could spend all day talking about and go into the
Yeah.
intricacies, but yeah, we're limited on time unfortunately. So yeah, just like to thank you for your time. Thank the viewers for tuning in to another episode on the CX Today YouTube channel. You know, like, subscribe, all that usual stuff, and yeah, keep an eye out for all the Sanus news and updates that be coming through on our website.
All right. No, thanks so much for your time. And thank you, everybody, for listening.